I would say instead of chasing titles, chase experience because you can tell those stories and a title might not necessarily give you the same experience. I would also suggest that in the beginning, definitely learn from people, have your mentors, bosses that you love. You can also learn from people that you don't like or that you don't love. And I would say take what you want with you. That's a theme, for me is take what you want with you. So you can say like, hey, that was really cool. I really liked the way that person operated or the way that person approached XYZ in terms of their expertise. Take it with you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Thrive and Achieve with your host, Dr. Matt Markle. Thrive and Achieve is the only podcast where professionals help professionals to succeed in career and wealth. Now, here's your host, Dr. Matt Markle.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Thrive and Achieve, where professionals help professionals thrive in their career and achieve financial success. Today, I am super excited to introduce Jesseca Lane. I met Jess recently, and I could see the spark of someone that is not only very, very driven herself, but also drives others to achieve more than they possibly even thought was possible. Jess is an award-winning marketing and leadership executive. She has over 20 years of experience building and scaling global lifestyle, finance, and technology brands, including Fortune 500 companies like Porsche, Visa, MillerCoors, Anheuser-Busch, one of my personal favorites, being from St. Louis, as well as working in some high-growth startups, which she has taken to IPO exits as well as unicorn status, over $1 billion in valuation. She's coached and consulted across multiple industries, always with a focus on aligning strategy with purpose, people, and performance. Now, with Jess, psychology has always been a key aspect of her insight, and in 2024, she returned back to school to pursue a master's in clinical psychology at Pepperdine University, just continuing her commitment to human-centered leadership and success. And then this year, to build upon that, she's launched the Full Cup Company to fulfill a long-held mission to make work happier, healthier, and more purpose-driven, both for individuals and the organizations that they empower. Jesseca, welcome to Thrive and Achieve.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was so kind. And I appreciate the warm welcome. It's awesome to be here with you, Dr. Matt. I've loved chatting with you, since we've met. So thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so I gave a little bit of an overview of your professional journey, but let's dive in deeper. What got you to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I definitely think sort of embracing the journey, right? And always embracing growth, I think was always a big key theme for me. But just to sort of break down what you just sort of gave the audience, but in a little bit more of Cliff's Notes, I started out in advertising and marketing. So I worked on a lot of Fortune 500 brands, like you mentioned, but outside of the brands themselves, what you're really learning is you're learning how to work at these big organizations on cross-functional teams. You're learning how a company goes to market, develops products. You're learning how they model their financial margins, right? And their financial projections. So you're really learning how a best-in-class multi-million or billion-dollar business runs when you get to work on those big brands. And I think for me, that was something that as I continued to rise in my career and continue to get that experience, I was like, wow, this is cool. Because then when I started going to smaller environments, such as tech companies or newer companies, I realized I loved that building and I loved taking all that I had learned about how to commercialize commodities. I mean, really selling toilet paper. Okay. And so it's really interesting when you think about it, or, selling cars that don't need to be sold, like a Porsche. So you can really sell anything, a lot of it has to do with the wrapper. And so I'm learning, kind of how to do that. And then when I went to some of the smaller environments, I realized I loved building, but I also realized that at the core of a good marketer is really understanding a product. And at the core of a great brand is really a great product and a great story, sort of behind it. And so that was a lot of fun building those companies. And then I would say that a pivotal moment for me was, you mentioned I helped take one company to billion-dollar unicorn status. And that was in the year of 2022, across 2021 and 2022. And then right before Christmas of 2022, I was let go in a mass reduction from that same company. And so as I progressed throughout my career, my occupational identity was very tied up in these awesome brands that I had worked for, and I'm very grateful for that experience. But it was a kind of a hard blow to take when that happened. And so, just to kind of round out, like, how did I get here? It took me longer than I wanted to. And that's the reason I actually founded my company. So a lot of it's based on my journey and my experience. So for personal and professional reasons, I was always interested in psychology, obviously. So I decided to get my master's. But when I did that, I promised myself I wasn't going to throw away the first half of my career. I definitely, wasn't ready to abandon all of my hard work, and credentials and skills. And so I promised myself that I wouldn't, and I would just continue to build and grow with my new skill sets and my new education. And that, plus the problem that I saw in the market, which was, what do people do? Really talented people who are still ambitious that get let go. And why isn't there a more proactive solution for us to design our careers? That's how I landed where I am now and founding the Full Cup Co., which is career design, simply put.
That's amazing. It is so extremely important and useful to take what you've learned in one industry or one facet of your life and apply it to another. I've used that multiple times in my career, going from the government side in defense to the industry side, taking the defense industry to the self-driving car industry, big self-driving car industry to much smaller, all of those things. If you can bring all the insights that you have with you along the way, it just makes it so much better, because some people that might have been there for a long time, and that's the only way that they know. And you're bringing an entirely different, like a prophet from the desert. You're coming in with like, hey, there's a new way of doing something here. Let me show you. And they're like, oh, wow, that's just amazing. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, sometimes I think the coolest ideas are the most simple, and they're the problems that you solve that you wish existed in the world, and so and you develop the solution you wish to see. And so that's how I feel about this, because I can tell you that I followed this path for myself. It took me longer, and I was like, hold on a second. I believe everyone has their special sauce. This is my unique magic combination, of the best of who I am, right? So my experiences, my skills, my education, my desired impact in the world. And then I found a way to put a wrapper on that. And I think a lot of times it's like, well, we can talk about our feelings, but your therapist isn't really going to help you with, your career next steps, but you need to be able to have a place to acknowledge that, because like we said, our occupational identity, our entire identities are wrapped up a lot, right, in our work. And not to mention the fact that we spend, the data is like an insane amount of hours that equates to like roughly a third of our lives at work. So when we say it's just a job, I have to politely disagree. And it's not to say that we don't take opportunities that we know aren't forever for the experience or because we have to, but it's more to say you spend a third of your life there. So, of course, it's going to have an effect on your well-being. And I think having an awareness around that's really important.
right. And we're going to talk about how you can design that third of your life to be the most optimal here in a little bit. I want to ask, so theme of the show, thriving your career, achieve financial success. When you think about thriving and achieving right now, what does that, tell me about the Jesseca life. What does that mean to you right now?
For sure. I think it builds off of what I just mentioned. And sorry, I'm probably just excited and just giving you like all of my in my brain all at once. Here you go.
No worries. No worries.
But I definitely feel like it builds off of that idea of kind of living in your special sauce and knowing that, you're giving the best of what you have to give of the world. And for me, it also has to do with I'm solving a problem I had, and I want to help others do the same, but in their own way. And so I love this idea of, empowering people by showing them, and by sharing my experience. So I think living authentically in my truth, for example, the first time I posted about getting laid off was almost 3 years after the fact,
It's
because I
hard to
was
admit.
embarrassed
It's
and
hard
I
to
had
admit. It's a
shame.
blow to your identity. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, why would I have shame? I took that company to unicorn status. Are you kidding me? Why would I? have shame over the beautiful career you just introduced. But I did, you know, for things that weren't really tied to my specific role, to be honest with you. And so, yeah, I mean, really, really interesting stuff. So, yeah, I think being able to say, like, too, that, you know, I'm a bit of an alchemist. So, kind of taking a situation that was pretty crappy, right? And not saying it was overnight, but being able to kind of transform that and give it a little bit of meaning and reframe it. I think of that as like alchemy and being like, okay, it can be a yes and situation. You know, like it can be, yes, that was crappy. And now what do we do? You don't have to pretend like it didn't happen. You don't have to take all the blame for it, but you do need to take responsibility for your life, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, let's dive a little bit deeper. So you have this unique blend of marketing and now psychology. And because you're taking everything that you've learned throughout your career and you're putting them together into this like super awesome package of insight for your clients and for your followers on LinkedIn. How do these two play together exactly in what you're doing, the marketing and the psychology?
Yeah, for sure. I think, you know, first is, you know, we know that psychology plays a huge role in marketing, you know, so for all the big brands that I worked on and all the biggest initiatives, what you're doing is you're really trying to get people to feel a certain way. And you can do that in a multisensorial process, you know, through multisensorial cues, through language, creates reality, and relates through images, through color, through sound. So we're making choices, right, all the time in terms of how we want to make people feel because that's what really connects brands to people. So I think that was always part of why I really liked marketing because in college and my undergrad, before I got my, you know, entered to get my master's way back, way, way long time ago, I always really loved psychology. So I think I loved being kind of at the helm of that strategy. And then, you know, now it's a little bit more of how do we think of those things as distinct value, but kind of in a linear way. So at the Full Cup Co., for instance, we want to pair psychology with marketing so that we can help you in your next chapter, but also design it. So there's a lot of research that says if you're following your intrinsic motivators, that's a more sustainable method path to success than if you're following external motivators. So what do we do in the first half of the program is we're really looking at those intrinsic motivators, right? And that's a lot of psychology, right? That's a lot of understanding ourselves, understanding our values, but also understanding our experiences and what they mean to us. Because that's where, especially as we grow in our careers and our lives, we derive meaning. And if we're able to create our own narrative, that really gives us some control. So that's kind of the psychology piece now. And then we look at, okay, great. Now that we know all that information, how do we market it? How do we wrap it? Right? Because our own IP, as you and I have discussed kind of behind the scenes, is you know, sort of more, it's stronger than ever. It has more power than ever, you know, and everyone kind of has that in them. So I think it's a different way of applying psychology, but, you know, psychology is woven throughout sort of everything I've always done, just in different ways.
And I think one of the cool things I see, because I read a lot of psychology things as well, is that now, unlike the marketing from the days of Mad Men back in the 1960s, we have names for how to pull the different levers and how to make us feel certain things. So it's a lot more. So we have a lot more tools at our disposal, as well as just all the multimedia things that are available now. So it's really a great time for you to be able to pair these things together. But this can benefit like current employees as well, right? You know, what would you say for them? How can this marketing insight help them?
Okay, yeah. I definitely think I had this ordered differently, but I feel like the biggest thing I would say is get as much experience as you can. I think when you're young, right? Like I would say instead of chasing titles, chase experience because you can tell those stories and a title might not necessarily give you the same experience that maybe another title, even say a notch down, would give you at a different company, but you might get a wealth of experience there. So I think there's that. I would also suggest that in the beginning, you know, definitely learn from people, have your mentors, bosses that you love. You can also learn from people that you don't like or that you don't love. And I would say take what you want with you. That's a theme, you know, for me is take what you want with you. So you can say like, hey, that was really cool. I really like the way that person operated or the way that person approached XYZ in terms of their expertise. Take it with you. You can also learn from the things that you don't like that you see. They don't have to be badges that you wear, but you can just kind of implement that. And then, yeah, the last thing would be, I also harp a lot on this idea of special sauce and leaning into what makes you different. So kind of piggybacking off of the experience, nugget, it's get the experience and then notice kind of start to notice where your magic lies or what you're drawn to. And don't be afraid to lean into that, because it's going to be what ends up setting you apart in the long run. And growth can be uncomfortable, but if you're uncomfortable, it doesn't necessarily mean things are going bad. It could just mean you're growing.
100%. Oh my gosh. I love that chase experience, not titles. When I'm looking at resumes, and I see a lot of resumes, both when I was in corporate America and now as a strategic advisor for some different companies, people like to put the title there because they think that it's like really, prestigious, right? They'll put a title out there, but you don't know what they did in that job. You could be the director of something and really basically you were just keeping the ship going in the right direction versus you might have been at a lower level and had some real wins that you can claim from your experience. So the experience is much more than the title. And that's so spot on to be able to crystallize that like that.
Mhm.
And your concept of special sauce also, I think, is just really, it's really, as I think back to my career, because I was thinking about that a little bit, the things that I didn't have you back then to say like, okay, Matt, I didn't call this your special sauce and lean into it. I just started noticing like, I'm kind of good at this and I'm kind of good at
Mhm.
this. And, even as in the technical part, I was like, I'm really good at working with customers. I'm really good at helping them see the value in our products and basically being able to sell lots and lots of products and services to them. And even though I was, technical person at a master's and then a PhD, I was like, that was a skill that I really had that I was like really kind of leaning into.
Which is so cool, by the way, can I just say, Dr. Matt, because again, like the special sauce and kind of this intersection and the puzzle pieces coming together in this unique way, like you are very technical and you're very smart. And a different version of you might come across as intimidating, but that's not you. You have this interface of the customers and in just the warmth and sort of simplicity with which you break things down. And so I do think that that's part of your special sauce. Absolutely. But that's interesting because it's kind of it starts to be this interesting mix, right? Of skills and things that light you up and things that you're good at. And they don't necessarily all fit together, if you would first think about it or look at it on paper.
And they don't fit the mold of like, you think of an engineer and
Exactly.
you think of the classic joke, how an extroverted engineer, he looks at your shoes when he talks to you instead of his own shoes, right? So I was a little bit different. I was more extroverted. I did like going out and talking to people more and being on stage and sharing insight with people.
Stay with us. We'll be right back to Thrive and Achieve. If you're looking for more information about how to help W-2 employees, check out the Amazon #1 bestseller, Anti-Preneur. It's available on Kindle and now in paperback. Now back to the show.
So you've had to do some pretty substantial startovers in your career, right? You've had some pivots and so forth. What's takeaways for that? What would you share for somebody else who's, either by choice or by someone else's choice found themselves in this situation right now?
I think the reframe here would be the thing that I would like really, really harp on and sort of focus on. And what I mean by that is, I think starting over, I think there needs to be permission there, and that gives a sense of freedom. And so that's wonderful. I also think that leads us to a place where we think that the past is erased or there's something right that has to go. And I think it's a yes and. So let me just give a fun example. So when I was growing up in advertising in Chicago, and I was working at some of the biggest advertising agencies in the country, we had a lot of comedy troupes and comedy theaters in Chicago, home of Second City and a lot of comedians. Yeah. And so one of the things that we would do is we would go and we would have like team sessions hosted by these troupes. And one of the biggest most impactful exercises we would do is we would have an exercise and it would be yes and you were not allowed to poo or say no so if you didn't think it was the best or you had some feedback that say I said, okay, we're in a brainstorm, Dr. Matt, and I think this mural should have 5 tents on it. I'm making this up. And
Right.
you're like, what is she even talking about?
Oh, that's a
Who, instead
horrible
of
idea. Horrible.
saying no, yeah, what are you even saying? You would say, oh, well, yes. And I'm wondering if it's more impactful if we just have the one and da, da, da. And so you can see how that power of the yes and is just a total reframe, right? And so for me, I took that principle and I've just applied it to life. And I'm like, a lot of things can be true. And so how do we just say yes? And so I think that when you think about starting a new chapter, look, I wouldn't be where I am today if I was like, hey, that marketing career sucked. Or like, oh man, I was let go, tail between my legs, walk away. Don't continue to take credit or don't continue to talk about it anymore. It's like, excuse me. Absolutely not. That's 20 years of my hard-earned work. It's beautiful work. And guess what? If I abandoned that, I wouldn't have created the awesome brand that I now own today. If I wouldn't have believed that I was still good at those things and carried them forward, if I would have abandoned them, I wouldn't be where I am today. I just continued to build on them. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, that does. That's awesome. By the way, I use yes and all the time. I am a huge believer in that. I almost try to basically just not say no anymore. Even if I need to really reframe something for somebody, I do it in a yes and. So sometimes the pivot, we need to institute that ourselves, right? Sometimes it's taken out of our hands with like a layoff or something like that. But sometimes we find that professionals get stuck in roles that really no longer serve them. But what are some of the biases that kind of keep us stuck there? And I know you did some writing on this recently on LinkedIn. So I wanted to double click on that a little bit.
You're so kind to serve a softball. Yeah. No, so one of the things as I'm finishing up my degree, my master's in psychology, is I'm having a lot of fun taking what I'm learning and then applying that to what I'm doing, right? And sharing that. And so I take inspiration from the classes I'm in and what I'm learning about because it's stuff that is, I think some of it is mainstream. Certainly I learned about Freud early on and certainly we all know about Freud, but there are other things now, especially as I'm, almost 2 years into my degree and looking to finish up next year that are lesser known or that can be applied in new ways of thinking to our modern world, which is like rapidly evolving, right? So one of the things that we talk about in terms of bias, one of the things I just wrote about is this principle in theory called social constructionism. There were a lot of people that were behind the social constructionist movement, but Ken Gergen is a famous social constructionist and he had a lot of theories about social constructionism. But one of the things that, we kind of fail to understand is that like our realities are created for us by other people. So this is dramatic, but like think about the idea that nothing is objectively real. You and I have agreed, most of us have agreed the earth is round. Most of us have agreed,
There's a few
right?
holdouts still. There are a few
Right.
holdouts.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like, and so you can get really, really meta with it to bring it back down to some of the biases in the workplace and just us as, I think, employees. The 9-to-5 job, let's take a minute there. There's been a lot of writing, there's been a lot of thinking, a lot of discourse around how that's rapidly evolving. But like, think about the tools that we have at our disposal and think about the idea that now that we do most of our work on our computer screens, is that actually a good thing for us to be on the screen for 8 hours, lock steady all day even? I don't think so. There's a lot of data that says no. Alongside that, so think about like the 9-to-5 job is the traditional way to earn money. I think we need to rethink that as kind of a bias, just in general. The data and just the sheer market numbers are showing like that's actually not true. There's quite a bit of volatility in that space. Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn, also has mentioned that the 9-to-5 will be extinct by 2034. Another dramatic statement, but I think that's also someone who's sitting on a lot of data, who sees a lot of trends. So, I think that's one idea of a bias of like, you only can have a career that's a 9-to-5 and you are left with the choices that LinkedIn, the available jobs on a job site are what's open and that those are your choices. I would like us to rethink that. I think that's an agreement that is now outdated, right?
Yeah, the
For
ability
instance.
to challenge the different conventional wisdoms that we have. That's just so important. It's everything. So much of what we see is based about the lenses that we bring to bear, right? I read once in some neurolinguistic programming training that like we bring in about 2 megabits of data every second. 2 megabits per second, but we only retain about 167 of those. So most of what we see coming in is left on the cutting room floor. And I think that having that ability to realize that what's retained is because of the lenses and the biases that we're seeing. 9 to 5, traditional family, certain gender roles, all these different things are all different aspects of the lenses that we put on, and challenging those I think is important. It's some of them maybe they're and still good for a reason, but challenging everything I think is just a strong and a healthy habit to get into.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that discourse. And I think that's it, right? It's just like you don't necessarily need to have an always on challenger mindset, but I think you need to understand like everything's very subjective and remember that. And I think just like we forget we have free will. And guess what? We have more tools than ever now at our disposal to sort of express that in unique ways and add value to the world. The other kind of like bias, Dr. Matt, that I think is more popular that we all know to be true, but I think it's worth noting quickly, and then we can move on to sort of whatever you want. Two things I wanted to know are the spotlight effect, which we're all familiar with. So just a note, like no one cares
Well,
as
let's
much as you think that
just
they do.
explain it.
Yeah.
Explain the spotlight effect just for anybody who doesn't, might not know what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Basically, so this actually starts when we're really young. So if anyone can remember junior high, adolescence, where we feel like, oh man, we got a blemish and we have to go to school and, or there's something that's a little bit minor, but we feel like, oh my gosh, right? The spotlight is on us. And the truth is that's not true. To your point of the information and all that now, especially that we're consuming every day, people might notice you for a second and then they're on, and most people are thinking about themselves. Most people do not think of you nearly as much or care as much as you think that they do. So it should be freeing for all of us to hear that. And I'm seeing it sort of become more mainstream where people are like, yeah, sort of let go of this need to sort of please everyone because no one's even thinking about you that much. So do you?
I heard a great anecdote on that once. It was like in your 50s, you're really, really worried about what everybody else thinks about you. And in your 50s, you're like, I don't care what they think about me. And then in your 60s or 70s, you're like, they were never thinking about me in the first place. You realize that they're just not, we think everybody spends so much more time thinking about us, but they really don't. So that's just such an excellent observation there. So you deal a lot with corporate leaders, like mental health in the workplace. What's something that if you had some insight you wanted to pass on to corporate leaders, or what do you think that they're missing right now that would, that they could use to improve performance and perhaps even improve retention in their companies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's so much to unpack here, but I'll try to sort of start from the top in like more of a linear place. So when I started doing research, because I'm very like, data and research driven, both because that's what we need to be in terms of looking at empirical methods in my grad school class, but also that's how you learn to become a good marketer because you're kind of combining that, like the data with the magic, the art and the science, So, I kind of like the combos, the collabs. And one of the biggest things that I realized was that, did you know that both the World Health Organization and the U.S. Surgeon General have workplace well-being guidelines? And that's become a recent development in the last several years because of the state of the well-being in the workplace and because of the state of burnout in the workplace and lower engagement numbers than we've seen. So one of the pieces of data that I came across that was so interesting is that one of the biggest driving forces of employee well-being at work is the manager relationship. So I think number one, just in terms of like at the org level, manager training. Now you might say, what would that manager training entail, Jess? Because we've all kind of taken different versions of a training and, maybe we might even roll our eyes a little bit at the idea of taking another one. I would say this. I would say less is more and focus on the right things. If you can do one that's holistic and hits all the points that you need it to hit, it will probably end up saving your company money and helping it grow exponentially. Because if you track it back to one of the biggest driving forces of employee productivity and engagement is this relationship. If you can have those managed appropriately, that's where I would start. And I would use, for example, let's talk about the U.S. Surgeon General. Let's talk about their guidelines. They focus on safety and security, so a psychologically safe workplace, support and belonging. And again, there's so much under here, but I'll give you kind of the big kind of buckets. So support and belonging. So think like, I know my manager has my back. I'm clear on what I need to do, but I also belong to a team that's aligned to what we're all trying to do, right? Autonomy and flexibility. So, rather than having necessarily things need to be done either an exact way and or having enough autonomy to do your job, and also probably some flexibility within life, right? Some things happen. So I think that rapport with your manager becomes really, really important, and you can see it. The next is dignity and meaning. So, of course, having, the appropriate language, as we mentioned, because language shapes our reality. So, training managers on this is also how you work through conflict, but this is also how you can use motivational psychology to get out ahead of things. And this is how you can allow for presence of the person. Also, meaning becomes really important when you think about what are we all working towards? If we can all be working towards the same goals, which requires cross-functional alignment, right? And like, these are the priorities, this is how I fit in, you're going to already see that engagement, right? Because I know how I fit into the bigger picture. And learning and accomplishment. So is this person being challenged at all? Are they being given opportunities that help to get them where they're going? Even if it's not promotion after promotion, but like, is the work meaningful to them? Is it helping them learn? And then what can we count as wins for those folks? So those are kind of like the 5 core buckets of what I would say like should go into a manager training. And I think if every company had a manager training like that was specified to the company, you would probably see a lot of great trickle-down effects.
That's because people leave not because of the benefits, not because of the CEO. They leave because of their frontline manager, right?
Yeah, and there's like
That's
so many different data points that support this. It's wild. So it's like the reason people leave, the reason for low engagement, like it's the top driver of most things. And there's another study that was done by WorkHuman, and I think Gallup combined this 2022 study, and it shows that only 10% of employee well-being is actually dictated by the person themselves. The other 90% is dictated by the systems, leadership, and culture of your work environment. So if I can just expand on this, from a workplace well-being standpoint and an environment standpoint, so for solopreneurs or anti-preneurs that are looking to design their own environments, right? The reason why your environment matters is because look at that data. So the reason why I don't like to coach people through burnout and then send them right back into the same environment is because they have a 10% chance of being successful, of not burning out in the same environment that burned them out before if nothing else changes. Does that make sense? So it's very interesting when you start to think about the systemic piece and at the leadership level, what would need to evolve to have more engagement, increase productivity, and improve some of those numbers at that org level.
that's amazing. I remember I've been in some pretty crappy manager trainings, and I've been in some very good ones as well. The one I did at Google, I went into it dreading it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be a bunch of, it's like 3 days of time, and I was like, I'm running a major product. I need to be focused on
Gotta
that.
get
I
back
can't
to
take
work.
time.
Yeah.
Gotta get back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by the quality and the insight in it. And they basically said, like, look, as managers and leaders, you have 2 things: develop your team and get things done. Those are the things that you're responsible for. And it's not a bunch of other stuff, and it's not just one of those 2 things. You have to get stuff done, but you also have to develop your team. And I was like, and just the way that we unpacked that and just continue to look more into it, just fantastic. But yeah, we've all been
Yeah.
in the sketchy ones where it's like, sort of woo-woo stuff is this, or this is, have you ever, you see somebody coaching it who's never been in the game themselves, right? So,
Yeah, for sure. Or, video content or what have you. But yeah, no, I think, yeah, there's just so much data behind showing how that's such a beneficial investment for companies. And like you said, what you learned at Google is so true, which is typically speaking, we get promoted because we're good at the skill. We're good at the
mhm,
job. Then we
right.
get promoted into leadership. That's a whole nother job. That's a whole nother layer. Like you said, they told you, develop your team. That's part of your job now. But like, where do you learn that piece? Because you already learned the skill piece. You could teach others that. But where are you supposed to get some of these other tools in your toolbox? So I think that's a gap in the market. I'm actually going to look, that's kind of my next thing, but I got to focus where I'm at first. But I think that's a big gap in the market, because the other thing is, like, the US Surgeon General, the World Health Organization have guidelines on this. Who is translating all of this? Like, there's, right? Because think about, like, their sample sizes and the amount of data that they're sitting on. So I think that there's work to be done there in terms of translating some of that into some goodness and really sort of helping organizations train their folks in that way.
Yeah, as you and I work together to change the way the workplace works, we're gonna make sure managers are ready before they become managers. And we're gonna talk about money in the workplace, because that's a great place for people, because you're already set up to learn and grow there. So you and I are gonna fix the world, or at least fix the workplace on that. So
I love it.
Stay with us. We'll be right back to Thrive and Achieve. But first, have you signed up for the Anti-Preneur Insider? This valuable resource provides one actionable tip on how to thrive in your career and one on how to achieve financial success. And it's free. There is so much noise out there today that it's really hard to see the signal in it. That's what the Anti-Preneur Insider does. It cuts through the noise to provide you the focused information that you need in a quick and entertaining email. Get it delivered to your inbox every Monday. Just sign up at antipreneur.com. That's anti-preneur, ANTI-PRENEUR.com.
okay, so I want to hear more. Full Cup is a brand new company. Super excited. I've seen the website relaunch. Looks really, really spot on.
Thank you.
Walk me through some of the programs that you're offering now, and who are those for? Are those for CEOs? Are those for someone who's 5 years experience, or the whole gamut? But let's just, I just want to hear about those a little bit here from you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Well, I think, it was born from me, right? My company. And so, full transparency, I think then, just to share a little bit as we go into the core product and who it's for former Jess, right? The one who had reached a certain pinnacle in her career, who was delighted by that success, but also kind of thinking about what's next, and then who actually got it taken away from her. So I would love for this to be before that happens for someone. My core product is called the Strategic Executive Exit. Full transparency, I'm 44, right? So one of the things that we learn about as we get into about our 40s to 65, I'm going to bring up another social psychologist, because I love social psychologists. And his name, he's famous. So folks may have heard of him, but his name is Erik Erikson. And why Erik Erikson's important to us is because he coined the stages of development based on our social stages. So essentially, at each stage of life, from a certain age to a certain age, you're experiencing a certain stage of social development. You're getting validation from your environment, right? So here comes in our environment again, right? And how we're being perceived and how we interact with our environments. When we turn 40, again to about 65, Erik Erikson calls this stage generativity versus stagnation. And so what this means is basically we have a lens now of all that we've experienced in our life, right? Carl Jung says life is just research up until 40, is wow, look at all of that. And now the look forward to what is our impact in the world? How are we involved in our communities? Probably maybe a deeper sense of family, or, getting involved in that some way, investing in our relationships. So it's natural that we would also have a question mark around our careers, especially if we either are feeling stagnant or we've been wondering what's next. So all that being said, this is for executives who have reached that point in their career. You could be a CEO, but more than likely you're probably an SVP or senior director, or right there snug up to the C-suite, wondering, do I want C-suite? You're very accomplished and you're really talented, and you're wondering, hey, I wonder if I sort of reapplied all of this goodness and maybe designed it in a way that was a little bit more beneficial to their well-being without the glass ceiling, what that could look like. So the strategic executive exit is basically everything I kind of took you through earlier, sort of packaged with a bow. So we start out with a wellness assessment against your 5 key pillars of well-being, just getting a sense of where you're at. You can't pour from an empty cup. Let's see. And then we go into all those intrinsic motivators that I mentioned that kind of accumulate with this sort of purpose on a page. So again, it's everything from your core skills, your life experiences, your beliefs. We talk about strengths and weaknesses, but there's a little bit of reframing there. Our core schemas, our beliefs, and then our desired impact in the world. And then from there, we kind of map. So that's all of our intrinsic goodness, and we need that because that's what's going to sustain us. But then we're like, okay, great. What do we do about it? So the second half of the program brings in kind of the marketing and the wrapper and the commercialization of it, which is to say, great, let's start to map some key themes, prototype, do some market research, and then set some goals and an activation plan to make sure that you actually then have your strategic executive exit plan. So it's a way basically for you to design your most ideal career and your life, because we're bringing back in those key pillars of wellness at the end to make sure, does this model work for me? Is it both something that there will be market demand for, and can I sustain it? Does it come from me? So that's the program. There's guided video and downloads that you work in. Worksheets. And then there's 2 times a week coaching calls. So it's all very, very confidential, small groups. And then you also have a community board where you can post your progress and I get back to you within the day. So it's pretty comprehensive in terms of bringing someone who's like fairly burnt out, doesn't really know what's next, but talented and wants to invest a little time in 90 days or less. You can design that plan. And it's all based on kind of this career design method and framework that I've developed.
So it's basically, so whether you stay at your current company, you and continue to thrive there, or you go to something else or whatever, it's like a career and a life tune-up to really get you really in the best operating point that you can, both in your career and your life side. Is that a fair way to sum it up?
I think, yeah, for sure. I think of it as work that you will never regret. Why wouldn't you sit and map out what your fullest alignment could be? No one's telling you to quit right away. Now, if you're laid off, I think it's a great resource too. I also, by the way, have a digital only version. So if you're like, I don't really know about the community, the live coaching, I do want the juicy frameworks, and to be able to sort of DIY it. Great. Different, sort of offerings for folks where they're at. But yeah, I think of it as like investment in yourself. You and I have joked about this idea. You made an awesome comment actually on my LinkedIn. And it was something about like the investment in yourself. And you were like, yeah, it's amazing how much people will pay for like a vacation over the holidays. But look at something of equivalent price or even less, 90 days or less, and you could truly have what you know in your heart is, sort of your true alignment, and be able to really look at your life from a proactive, purposeful lens. It also helps pull out kind of that impact piece that people could be kind of thinking about, at this stage in life. So I like it. Again, I wish it's what, had existed for me. I'm simplifying this idea of kind of just career design because I think it's powerful and I think it's a tool that, sort of everyone can use in their own way. But that's where I'm at. And to your point, early stages. So I'm sure I'll continue to learn.
That is fantastic. It sounds like a wonderful program. We will spend, 5, 10 grand on a week down in Florida to get sunburnt and have nothing to show with it from at the end of it. But we won't spend that for something that could pay for itself if it helps us move up that next level in the company, or pay for itself in terms of like the health aspect of like being able to sleep well at night, having peace in your heart, all those sorts of things. It's worth a lot more than a vacation in Florida. And 10 grand,
Yeah.
I was at Disney recently. 10 grand might not even cover it anymore. I don't know. They're pretty expensive there. So.
Well, good news is my program is less than that. What I would say too is like do it on vacation. Yes, and
Oh, there you go.
great.
There you go.
Kick it by the beach if that's what you need to reset. That's wellness too. But I think, like you said, it's so interesting, right? Like we design our vacations, we design our homes, we design our meal plans, we design our exercise regimes, and then somehow, it comes to our careers and it's a little befuddling, and it can be. And so I just want folks to know they're not alone there. And I feel like this is a fun solution. Thanks
That
for
is
giving me
awesome.
the opportunity to chat about it.
Oh, 100%. I think it's going to help a lot of people. Okay, rapid fire questions. We're at the we're going to wrap this up here in just a sec. One piece of career advice or financial advice that's completely wrong.
Okay. I'm going to do an evolved statement here. This is kind of
Okay.
what came to mind. So I would say the work hard and it will pay off. I'm not going to say that's wrong, but what I'm going to say is I think the caveat would be for yourself. And so don't give it all away to a boss or a company, that steals your ideas, or a company or a title, or chase that too much. Do the work, get the experience, be good, be awesome to work with, all the things. But don't give everything there and take credit for some of your work, because that's you too. That's some of your magic. Maybe technically your company owns, some of that work, but like it's also yours. And so I think this idea of like own your career, own your narrative, own your voice, own your special sauce, this will all take you further in the end. Showing up for yourself. No one's going to tell you to do that. I can guarantee you the current organization that you work for will not tell you this. So that's what I wish someone had told me, because no one that I work for told me that. And that's okay, because they weren't really supposed to. It wasn't in their best interest. But I'm telling you that because it's in your best interest.
Awesome. Okay, pay it forward. If you could teach every professional just one lesson on money or career, what would those be?
Say you can reframe anything to make it work for you. So don't accept a story someone else tells you at face value. For instance, if I had accepted the fact that I had gotten laid off, I would be a marketer that was laid off still, wouldn't I?
Right.
And so let's not accept the things that happen to us in life as fate. We can reframe the narrative at any moment.
Excellent. Excellent advice. Jess, you've given us a ton of useful insight and advice today. I took some notes here. The special sauce, chase experiences, not titles, intrinsic motivation, focusing on manager training, owning your own narrative, showing up for yourself, just and more. Just a lot of great advice and a lot of great insight. How can people get in touch with you?
Very kind of you. So fullcupco.com is the website. You can follow me, Jesseca Lane, on LinkedIn. I'm writing a lot there. And then the Full Cup Co does have an Instagram page too that's motivational and kind of has some more juicy nuggets for you if you want to follow along.
Awesome. That's good. Make everybody follow Jess on LinkedIn. And it makes so much sense. You can't pour from the Full Cup. When I first heard that name, I was like, what is this? But you can't pour from an empty cup. So that just makes total sense. And it's so on brand for you. Jesseca, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you for all this super valuable advice.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun chatting with you, Dr. Matt. I'm excited to continue the chat.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, I want to see you next time on Thrive and Achieve, where professionals help professionals thrive in their career and achieve financial success. Have a great day, everybody.